Very good afternoon to everybody who's joining us today on YouTube and Facebook. Thank you very much. My name is Aaron Sama. I'm the General Partner at ScaleUp Malaysia, and welcome to our ScaleUp Malaysia partner sessions as part of our prelude to cohort number 3. We're really excited to have you today, and we're really excited for this session. We've been doing these sessions as a way for us to speak to our partners and to unlock how the partners who work with ScaleUp Malaysia add value to businesses in Malaysia and around the world. And maybe we'll also find out how they can unlock value for your business today. ScaleUp Malaysia, as you know, is an accelerator that looks at emerging companies out of Malaysia who wish to grow from Malaysia and beyond. And today we've got a really exciting partner joining us. It's General Assembly. General Assembly has been helping tens of thousands of people upskill and reskill to meet the needs of the modern workforce. And we're really excited to have General Assembly Malaysia join us today to have a hour-long chat about how General Assembly can help you upskill your business, change and transform your team for the future ahead and the world that's to come. We've got some exciting guests today. In a bit, we'll be speaking to Andrew Pereira, who's the CEO of General Assembly Malaysia. We've got Anisha, who's also a CEO, but she's the Chief Experience Officer of General Assembly. We'll find out more about that later. And also we've got Heng, who's the COO of General Assembly Malaysia, who will also be joining us later as well. But first, we're going to have a chat with Andrew, who's going to go through some content with us and maybe explain to us a little bit. How we're going to do is we'll have a session with Andrew first, then we'll have a fireside chat with the other two distinguished colleagues of ours who's on this panel with us today, and then we'll go and open up to questions from the floor. So I'd like to remind you, if you're watching us live on Facebook or YouTube, shoot questions into the comments section. We will take them live on air, and we will try to answer them as quickly as we can and try to get to answer your burning questions. Before we go to Andrew, hi everyone, how are you guys doing?
Great.
Good.
Awesome.
Very good.
We're going to send Mark and Anisha to backstage for a second, and I'll introduce Andrew real quick. And after we introduce Andrew, then I'll also leave the stage, and Andrew, then it'll be your show. So Andrew Pereira, he's the CEO of General Assembly Malaysia. He's an expert in education and learning, having designed and delivered learning for 150,000 learners for 60 organizations and in 30 countries. I understand you're interested in fitness. That's pretty obvious. Actually, you look like a pretty fit guy. And you're interested in travel. Of course, when we can travel, it'll be nice to travel as well. Ex-McKinsey are here, and also a lawyer. Wow, okay, I won't mess with you when it comes to contracts. All right. So, Andrew, I'm really looking forward to this session where we'll be talking about building your business around people. You'll be talking about the building blocks of an organization. Really looking forward to this session. Andrew, over to you, and I'll check back with you later today.
Yeah, thanks, Aaron. It's a week to everyone. As Aaron meant, a little bit about early on, so that we have a bit of a
sorry, Andrew, it seems like it's a little bit disjointed, at least from my end. I don't know if the guys backstage are. Yeah, it's like a robotic voice. Could it be a headset? It's all right. These things happen. This is like how we live in today's. It sounds better actually from what I can hear from the.
Can you hear me now?
Way better. It's excellent now. Excellent.
Fantastic. Okay, right. I can
so
promise
Andrew,
that I am in fact human.
Cool. We were like phoning you, and it was like a VR simulation or something. All right. Over to you, Andrew.
Thank you, Aaron.
Thanks so much.
Appreciate it. Hi, everyone. My name is Andrew Pereira. It's a real pleasure and a privilege to be speaking to all of you today. As Aaron mentioned, I'm going to start off with a short presentation that hopefully will allow us to have a common language, to have a conversation later on today's webinar, together with my colleagues Anisha and Mark, about what does it actually take to unleash the potential of people and build an organization instead of just building a business. So I'm going to start off with a quick presentation, and then we'll get into the fireside chat relatively quickly. All right, thank you. Moving forward. A quick introduction to actually, even before I go into talking a bit about General Assembly, let me tell you a bit about myself. Thank you, Aaron, for the introduction. The only thing I will add, in addition to the fact that I'm a reformed lawyer and ex-consultant, is that I wanted to tell you a bit about my passion in life and really my purpose, my mission. And it's this, right? If I had to sum it up in a single phrase, it's to unleash the potential of people, right? And this is the thing that I get up in the morning for. It's the thing that I pursue in my professional career and my personal life as well. And hopefully, I'm able to share some of that passion with you in today's webinar. Right, moving forward. An introduction to General Assembly. So General Assembly is a global leader in digital talent development. We were established in New York in 2011, so about 10 years around now, and we entered into the Malaysian market in 2019. We have 33 campuses around the world. There are 19,000 plus companies around the world that employ GA talent, including about half of the Fortune 100. Hundreds of thousands of learners around the world have taken our programs. We take outcomes very seriously. 92% of our reskilling students get a job within 180 days. After 180 days, it actually goes up to 99%. So we take learning very seriously. We take unleashing the potential of people very seriously. Very excited to be having this conversation with you today. So moving forward, let's get into the meat of today's session. There are three things we hope you walk away from this session with, right? First is to really understand the differences between building an organization and building a business, because many people conflate these two things. They aren't the same. You can have a business, but not actually have an organization. There are many companies out there that really are businesses, but don't actually function as organizations. And I'll talk to you a bit about what I mean when I say organization versus business. The second thing is to explain, a little bit about the building blocks that are necessary for all organizations, and we're going to have a bit of a conversation about what it takes to develop those building blocks and ensure that you have all the pieces in place to have an organization. And finally, we're going to have a conversation about how to build a healthy but also scalable organization that will support your business goals. So those are the three things we hope you walk away from today's session with. But first, I wanted to start off with something a little bit different, right? So since we're talking about people, I thought I'd start with a question for all of you here, and because there are many things that humanity has invented or discovered that have really changed the planet, that have really changed humanity. Some people might say it's fire, it could be transport. Many people say the internet obviously has changed things. But I'm curious what you guys think man's greatest invention or discovery is, right? So we're going to have a bit of a poll on the next page. What is humanity's greatest invention, right? So you can go to menti.com or scan the QR code. I'm curious to see what all of you have to say. What is humanity's greatest invention? So we'll give you just a minute or so to scan the QR code and answer the question. Okay, let's give it a few more seconds, and then Idle, my colleague, will be able to share what some of the findings are. All right, we seem to be experiencing technical difficulties yet again. We can't seem to change the screen, but that's okay. There are a few things that people have shared, and I'm going to read out some of the examples that people have identified as humanity's greatest invention. So that seem to be a bunch of technology related things. The internet obviously is up there. Wheels. One of the things that people have identified as humanity's greatest invention, fire, right? And there are more, right? Vaccines. I would agree with that. The vaccines are pretty amazing invention, especially the most recent vaccines that have been developed in amazingly short periods of time. Electricity, antibiotics. Yes, I would agree. These are all amazing innovations, amazing inventions. They have really transformed humanity. They've transformed the face of the planet, right? But I put it to you that in actual fact, at least to me, right, that humanity's greatest invention is not an invention per se, not necessarily a physical thing, right? I put it to you that humanity's greatest invention is actually organizations, right? What do I mean by organizations, right? And hopefully this becomes a springboard for the rest of the conversation. If you move forward. So what is an organization? Well, first distinguish it a bit. So there are individuals, right? All of us are individuals. We do our own thing, and we live our lives great, right? Teams are formed when individuals work together on a common purpose. Right? So you might have a team of people, and if you think about ancient history, you get groups of people who got together and decided to go hunting together, right? And they go and hunt down a woolly mammoth together. That's a team. Or a bunch of people get together and farm some wheat, right? Like that's a team, right? You have a group of people all doing roughly the same thing, achieving one single purpose, right? An organization, I put to you, is actually a bunch of different teams. So you have different groups of people who are focused on different things, have different missions, doing different work from one another. But those teams, even though they're highly specialized in doing just one thing, they work together and they achieve something together, the organization's purpose or mission, right? And that's, if you think about it, really what sets us apart from animals, right? There are animals that form teams as well. I think about like wolves going on a hunt together. But there are very few species that actually form organizations, right? And there are no species that form organizations where those organizations can decide what their collective purpose is going to be. It's not just one purpose, i.e. survival, that they're able to go out and decide what they're going to do. And that you have all these people doing different things, and yet somehow magically they're able to accomplish bigger things together. If you think about all those inventions you saw over there, vaccines, the internet, different modes of transport, antibiotics, none of them would have been possible, or none of them would have scaled if it weren't for organizations. So, I put it to you that organizations are man's greatest invention, and that's what we're going to talk about today. Now, what do we mean by organizations? What does it actually take to build an organization? Because many of you out there are parts of businesses, and you're wondering to yourself, how do you actually take a bunch of people working together in a business and turn them into an organization? There are three things that we're going to talk about today. People, structure, and processes. Right now, I'll talk to you very quickly about each of these in turn, and then we can get to the fun part. Starting first with people. People, this building block is all about how do you get the most, how do you attract people, and how do you get the most out of them? How do you attract, develop, excite, retain talent who will do their best to advance your organization's goals, right? And this is done in different ways by organizations, right? Some of these may appear familiar to you, right? Things like recruitment. How do you share a compelling employer value proposition? How do you adopt a fact-based approach to hiring talent? What do you do to help people learn and develop over time, right? Investing in continuous learning and growth. And by the way, this doesn't have to be, yes, it's wonderful. You can come and work you can come to an organization like General Assembly and we can help grow your people, but that's not the only way you can help people grow, right? Like it's possible for you to have things like lunch and learn sessions, in-house programs, people sharing stories with one another. People learn that way too, right? Things like performance dialogues, actually sharing quality feedback regularly. It's amazing the number of organizations that I've worked with, especially early stage organizations, I find, where the feedback just isn't happening, right? Like people actually don't sit down and have a conscious conversation that's not about the work, but about the individuals who are working. And also purpose, right? How do you share your organization's purpose? Does your organization even have a purpose? If you ask people in your organization to describe what your organization's purpose is, are they all going to say the same thing? And are you helping link people's individual sources of meaning to the organization's purpose? Because guess what? Very few people sign up to organizations and say, yeah, I'm all about just that organization's purpose, right? They have their own goals, their own wants, their own sources of meaning. And they need to, it is the job of leaders to find a way to help link those sources of meaning to the organization's overall purpose. So that's what the people building block is all about. How do you find individuals, people, to join your organization and get the most out of them, right? And help them perform at their best. Building block number 2, that is structure. Now, what is structure all about? Structure is how do you design your organization so that it is efficient, effective, scalable, right? Some of this, again, familiar, organization design. When I say organization design, a lot of people their minds will immediately jump to org charts, right? But it's not just org charts, right? How do you define teams and their missions clearly, right? So it's not just about boxes and lines. And I would argue that when an organization is in its early stages, this is one of the single sort of most important decisions that you can make as you are building an organization, right? Deciding what the teams are going to be and what the mission is going to be for each of those teams. And how do you make sure that that organization design is something that won't just work today, when you've got 5 people, doing a set of things together. How is it going to work? How's that organization design going to work when you've got 100, 200, 500 people? Yeah. Outsourcing, insourcing, right? How do you evaluate what you should do in-house versus outsource? Because guess what? If you're, in relatively early stages or you're scaling up, it probably doesn't make sense for you to be doing everything in-house, right? Actually, it never makes sense for you to do everything in-house. So how do you decide what is core to what you do and what should be done outside? Role clarity, another trap that I see a lot of early stage organizations fall into is where responsibilities aren't entirely clear. And those responsibilities, even if they are clear, are more responsibilities for individuals as opposed to the roles that those individuals are in, right? Because, it's very easy to say, oh, right, Bob can do this. But in the future, you're going to have to hire 5 more Bobs, right? And are those 5 Bobs going to be able to do what today's Bob does? So it can't be about individuals. It has to be about roles. How do you make sure that the responsibilities for roles are clear and that everyone knows what those roles are? Because guess what? They change over time. And then career pathing. Many people join organizations in their early stages, not because of the role that is offered to them, but because of where they could be in the future as the organization grows. So what is that path? What is that opportunity that you are going to create for them in the future? That's a really important part of structure. And then the third building block, number 3, processes. What are the tools and processes that will help individuals and teams work together efficiently and effectively? You'll see here, the number one thing I've put here is meeting cadence. And for those of you who are familiar with the legendary investor, Ray Dalio, and read his book, Principles, one of the things that he's obsessed about is meetings, right? And, and I agree with that, right? If at the end of the day, organizations are groups of people working together, how do you, meetings are one of the number one ways that individuals collaborate with one another. And anything that you can do to make meetings work better is going to make your organization work better. I had a client that was a large industrial company, huge, 20,000 people all across the globe working together. And, their leadership team actually, approached us and asked us, hey, can you look at how we're conducting meetings right now? Because we have a feeling that it's actually holding our organization back. So they actually wanted external help to look at how meetings were happening. And we discovered that people were spending too much time in meetings. And funnily enough, there was too much time in meetings, but they weren't speaking to enough people. They actually weren't collaborating with enough people because they were all stuck, in long meetings. And we just made one change. So, if you go to your calendar invite and you create a calendar invite, right? The default is usually an hour long, right? So usually it's an hour to get for a meeting. We changed it so that the default was half an hour, right? One small change. Meeting lengths reduced, and interestingly enough, people were able to talk to more individuals because they had there was less time that was being spent in meetings. And this is an example of just how powerful meetings are. It can completely change the productivity of an organization. And in this case, just that one change saved this organization millions in productivity, actually tens of millions in productivity per year. And it can also completely change how people interact with one another. So how do you identify regular meetings necessary for collaboration and be very clear in their purpose? Performance management, processes and methodologies. Again, this is, it's very easy in the early stages to become very fixated on just getting the work done. When actually you should be spending time taking a step back and thinking, okay, I've gotten the work done, it's worked well once. How do I standardize this, document it, iterate on it so that I'm not just doing this job well once. I'm able to, I've got a process in place that will be robust, repeatable, and that will allow me to be successful for all the work that's going to happen in the future, right? Knowledge management, this is how people share and find information. One of the things that, in GA, when we first started it, one of the first things we did was we actually organized all the shared folders that we had, right? And who was going to be responsible for keeping those folders up to date and with information in them. It was extremely, it sounds like such a simple thing, but that one bit of investment that we made early on really helped us with our knowledge management, really helped everyone in the organization find data and information whenever they needed it. And finally, tools, right? I think many of us here have probably used certain tools that have, completely transformed our productivity and improved experience, right? For me, tools like, and by the way, I'm not getting paid by any of these companies, but tools like Slack, right? And the integrations that come together with it. Or, when I first used Salesforce or, actually any CRM, any good CRM for that matter, right? They completely transformed the productivity of my team, my organization, and improved experience for everyone. And I can't imagine life without those tools, right? And for every single one of your businesses out there, it doesn't matter what you do, there are going to be tools that will help boost productivity and make you think, wow, how did I ever do this thing before I had this tool? Go out and find those tools, encourage their use, and constantly revisit that list of tools that you're going to be using. Because guess what? It's gonna change over time, and it's gonna continue to transform how you do your work, how your organization functions. So that's a bit about the building blocks. At this point, would love to get into a bit of a conversation about these building blocks. And we have Aaron, I think, is going to be moderating a fireside chat among the three of us now.
Hey, Andrew. Hey.
Hi, Aaron.
Thanks. That was excellent. I learned quite a bit actually about how you structure between people, structure and processes, and I'm looking forward to get into a little bit more of a discussion with all those here. Before we start, I'd just like to do a gentle reminder to those who are watching. We've got quite a bit of people, especially on YouTube for some reason today. Don't be shy. Drop some questions in the comment box. We'll get in as quickly as possible. But in the meantime, we'll try to jog your creative juices to ask these questions by interrogating or like asking questions to those who are on the panel. No, will be nice. But I'd like to invite your other two colleagues, Anisha Pradhan. She's the Chief Experience Officer at General Assembly Malaysia. She's responsible for delivery of our digital and professional skills at GA. She's passionate about learning experiences, impact evaluation, animal welfare, and cooking. So I don't know if everybody's at their lunch, but we'll ask Anisha for some cooking tips if he's got the time later. I also really like that you kind of are passionate about B40 access to education, which I think is really, really cool and really something that's needed. And you also involved in launching the education blueprint while at Pradhan. So welcome, Anisha. Looking forward to talking to you more. We also have Mark Heng. He's the Chief Operations Officer. One thing I noticed from your bio, Mark, is that you're interested in meditating. So I guess as an operations guy, you need to be chill and calm and relaxed. So clearly meditation is useful to you. And you're also a diehard Liverpool fan. I don't really watch football, but my whole family are Liverpool fans, so I feel the need to highlight that, and apologies to those who are not Liverpool fans. So you're basically championing corporate processes at GA, ensures smooth sailing of day-to-day operations. You're the guy who keeps the lights on and makes sure the wheels are spinning, while Andrew and Anisha sizzle the sausage and make things exciting. So awesome. So guys, great to have everybody here, and great to have you join us. Maybe we'll let Mark and Anisha just do a quick round of introductions, just to introduce yourselves. Andrew, you've done it earlier, and then we'll get to the questions. So maybe we'll start with the lady first, Anisha. Yeah.
Sure. I think perhaps it's best that I start with what exactly do I do with that sort of, vague title, Chief Experience Officer.
Yeah, it's like a CEO, but not really.
Yeah. So when I was talking to Andrew about it, I was like, can I decide any title? I thought it'd be quite fun. So actually the role, I think, and the reason why it's called experience is because at the end of the day, what is most important for a learning institution is the experience our learners have, the experience our staff have, and the experience our instructors have, right? Now you can imagine as an organization, if the learners are having a terrible experience or the instructors do not like teaching in our school, in our institution, or our staff are really unhappy, right? Our student success managers, our salespeople, if they're not happy, that impacts the overall quality of what we deliver. And so my role is to make sure all those things are going really, really well, and we're doing exciting things to make it new and refreshing and exciting, right? So that's kind of what the role is all about.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
In terms of myself, I think basically I really just love learning and what it means to learn. How do you learn effectively? And that's what really drives me every day. And I've done work in various ways to achieve those goals, right? Either in a non-profit, government, or right now in a for-profit organization.
Awesome. Cool, Anisha. Mark, and we'll get back to you more, Anisha, in a second, right? Mark, welcome. Maybe you can share a little bit about yourself and introduce yourself to those who are in the audience.
Sure. Happy to be here and happy to share my experiences with everyone. Well, as you say, I'm in charge of corporate services. So what does that mean? Andrew and Anisha are the front end and the back end. So if you think in terms of a movie, they are the actors, I'm behind the scenes and making sure the lighting is right so that everything actually looks perfect. So it actually means that we all have to work very well together to actually deliver one particular service. It all matters. I'm an accountant by profession. I have previous experiences in quite a few industries. So I'm very eager to be here and very eager to join this this crusade that Andrew and the rest of the team are pursuing, because I think it's a wonderful, wonderful objective and wonderful vision.
Absolutely. On that note, I think that's really true, Mark. I think we live in a very interesting time, given the fact that COVID has kind of disrupted a lot of the way people work. People are realizing that the skills that they studied maybe no longer apply or have to be applied differently to their careers, or they have to switch careers, learn new things. And so the role that General Assembly plays in the ecosystem, I think, is really important to help people who want a career switch and help companies who don't really want to fire their staff. They just need them to do different things and find ways to kind of train them to do that. So that's really, really important. At ScaleUp Malaysia, we actually work with a lot of startups, very early stage companies. They're at this inflection point where they're hoping to grow and get to the next stage of growth. And I guess one of the challenges in a startup, as a guy who's run a startup myself, is that you're small, right? And you're very you maybe don't have a lot of reputation. You don't have a name under your belt or many accolades to talk about. But you want to attract the best
talent you can, right? So how do you attract talents and candidates, especially for organizations like this, right? You're smaller, you're lesser known. Andrew, do you have any thoughts on this? Like, how do you attract talents when you're a small organization? You're not like a Petronas, or you're not like an Air Asia. You're just a little startup with 5 people. How do you get the best people? Yeah.
It's a great question, and by the way, I think it's I've experienced this myself, having started two separate organizations, and when you're employee number 1, or you're the founder, or you're employee number 2 or number 3, and you're trying to get the next 20 people to come on board, what do you say to them, right? How do you get them on board? And I think a few things have always helped me with that, right? I think one is always being extremely clear about the mission, the crusade, as Mark put it, right? Sell the vision, because they may not, you might not have a name, you might not have a brand yet, but you have a dream, and you can sell that dream, right? And that's the difference between being a crazy person raving about something, and people talk about leadership being that, right? Like, leadership is effectively the art of selling your vision to other people and having other people join you on that crusade, right? So that's one thing, right? Like, be very clear why you're doing this, be very clear why your organization exists, and if you can articulate that compellingly, inspiringly, authentically, people will see that, and people who are buy into it will join you on that journey, right? The second thing is, and maybe this is not as lofty as that, but a very practical thing. Your network is an extremely powerful thing, right? The people and the people the friends of the people like, all of them are there's this community around you that you probably you're not even aware of sometimes, right? And that group of people can be, the first place that you start, tap that first group of people that you start tapping and reach out to, and it's interesting, right? Because a lot of people in General Assembly right now are people who were from my network, right? People who I met in different contexts before, and I may not even have started by saying, hey, come on board and work together with me. It may have started off with a simple conversation around, hey, I've got this problem here, can you help me with it? Or what do you think about this, right? And it's amazing how things grow from that. And if the people can't help you solve things, usually the friends of those people, they might know someone and they'll put you in touch. And it's amazing how powerful networks can be. And I always lean on my networks for the first few people that I bring on board to the new ventures that I work on.
Awesome. So you're saying, like, have a draw people in with the vision and the mission that you're embarking on, and then leverage the networks you have. Really interesting. And I guess that's really important, especially when you're kind of starting out and you really don't have credibility, and you have to leverage what you have, and the vision and network that you have is really what you can leverage on. I think the other thing is, when you're hiring in this environment, as well as when you're running a startup, where many years ago I was involved in a daily deals company, right? And we were hiring people for that company. And one thing I always said to people who are joining us is, like, the good thing is nobody ever has done this before, right? There are only probably 200 people in the country. And I was counting all my competitors at the time who are doing this exact industry. So we're all making this up as we're going along, and we're all kind of figuring out how to do this, right? And so it's sometimes the case that when you're hiring people, they may have the intrinsics of being in that role, but maybe they don't have the necessary experience. So I guess, Anisha, like, how do you appropriately assess a candidate for a role in an organization like this? They may have the right, attitudes, or maybe even aptitude to learn, but the resume doesn't speak to this. Would that be something that somebody should hire, or cast them aside? What do you think, Anisha?
So I really think it depends on the stage of your startup, right? To me, if you're in very early stage, you're looking to ramp up quite quickly. I actually think you need to hire someone who has experience in that specific role, because as the founder, you don't necessarily have the bandwidth at that point to do very precise coaching, right? In fact, you need them to advise you on the strategy. So if you have if you have people who are execution driven and can't give you that advice, you're going to end up in like a bit of an echo chamber. And so my advice for that is your initial team, you want to think about people, who are not necessarily very senior, maybe like 5 years experience. They understand how to do the work, but they've started to think a bit more about direction. They can self-manage, they can give you advice, but they can still are willing to do the nitty-gritty work, right? And then once you're at a stage where, you've got a product, you've got everything kind of running, then you think about these people with good intrinsics who are coachable, who you can bring on board, because then you have someone who can actually coach them, right? Yes, that's just my perspective.
So do you think that, it's interesting you're saying that you hire for the experience, which is important, but like in an early stage company where, everybody wears many hats, is it really something, because you may need, hey, I know you've been doing this thing for the last 5 years, but now I'm going to make you do this other thing because there's nobody else to do it. Do you think that works still? I think
what Andrew says is quite interesting, right? Andrew talks about this concept of role, right? And so in your early conversations with a candidate, you kind of want to be very clear about what their role is. And so maybe I can take myself as an example. When interviewing for this role, right? I had never worked in a for-profit business running an educational thing, but I had very clear experiences in delivering educational products. And so do I understand the overall goal of the role? Do I understand what it takes? Yes. And I have the ability to provide that direction and do some of the execution. And the rest, I'm willing to learn, I'm willing to take feedback. So I have those intrinsics, but I also have the broad base. I don't know whether that answers your question, Aaron.
Oh, that's interesting. So I guess that is down to the person in a way, and the attitude and willingness to kind of adapt to what the role would ask them for,
because
right?
you kind of have to scope out that role, right? And say like, you're never going to get someone that meets 100% of your role. But if you're hiring a chief marketing officer, they need to be able to do like maybe 60 to 70% of that role. And part of your thinking should be, well, what sort of marketing is most important for my product? And if you're saying digital marketing, then you want a guy or a person who is really experienced in that specific part, and the rest you think about coachable or feedback.
Yeah, because the reverse also is also equally painful. If you only hire for attitude with zero experience, then these guys are gonna be winging it, and you're not gonna get the results you want either, right? And so that's gonna be equally painful.
And you want to set them up for success, right? It's really important that people come in and they're set up for success. And if you can't provide them with that mentorship and they don't have the guidance from you, you're really not doing them any favors, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, that's really true. How do you assess the performance of employees in roles that you're less familiar with, right? Especially when people play these multiple roles. Mark, do you have any view on this? Like, how do you assess these people who have multiple roles, but you don't really know them very well?
Yeah, I think whether you're talking about a large organization, a small organization, a startup, a mature organization, we have to be able to measure employee performance. It eventually leads to improved productivity, better quality of work, provides focus to employee, better employee engagement. So how I would actually look at it, I would look at it from the point of view of the ability to execute, whether they carry out the task on time and how well they actually do it. Quality of work, like using best practices, adapting to different circumstances, and learning along the way. The level of thought, the level of experimenting, the level of improvements. How do they try new approaches? Do they discover new ways of doing things? And last but not least, looking at regular feedback and communicating with them, trying to do a 360, getting peer review, getting other managers to review, and even if they have subordinates, look at that. But let me give you an example. Okay, I'm taking an example out of my field because I'm encountered. Let's look at something from a content development point of view. In terms of coming up with content, in terms of being task-orientated, is to say, to deliver 3 pieces of content by the end of the day. So that's great, all right, but that's very task-orientated. Then we look at, in terms of quality that they actually produce. Do they get good engagement? Do they get reviews? Do they get good likes? The numbers, do people like what they have seen? And then last but not least is obviously the level of thought, the level of experimenting, and the level of improvements. What has the person learned in terms of delivering this piece of content. What in particular has attracted people to it? So once you blend all these things together, you have a very high-performing person, and that's what I'll be looking for when I'm looking to assess someone.
What do you think of the cadence of these assessments? So when I first started working, there was this thing, I don't know if you guys remember it, called an annual review. And then you had to fill out this massively long form, and then you'll see your boss, and then they'll respond to you. I feel like this is like archaic thing has gone the way of the dinosaurs, but I want to hear what you think. Like, is this something that, do you recommend weekly reviews? I've heard of people doing like almost daily catch-ups where you actually kind of touch this, like the 5x5 model, and different models where people are doing regular. How do you see this, and how do you think people should do these kinds of assessments?
So there's actually both ways. There's the formal way, which is that once a year or twice a year kind of thing. That's normally more for the HR to actually take that box to say that, yeah, we've done it. But more importantly, it's the informal reviews that you give, the ones that you do regularly engage and speak with your people. I mean, you'll be surprised. Performance management, if it's done well, is actually going to be a good motivator for people, because people actually want to come and work and learn. And when they learn and when they are contributing, that's where they feel truly motivated. And that's such a powerful thing in the organization.
That's a really interesting thing to say, right? Like, and I love it a lot, like, because people don't actually get a job just for the income. A lot of people want to do a good job, right?
Yeah.
And they want to have something, they want to do something meaningful with their time. That's really interesting. Yeah. I think I have one more question on this idea of people, and then we're going to go into structure. Maybe I'll throw this one at you, Anisha. One of the most painful things that happens is, of course, you want to hire fast, as we were talking about just now, right? You want to hire fast to join the company, get going quickly, and not everybody works out, right? And sometimes it doesn't, and if we, like what Ma was saying, we do regular catch-ups and you find out that maybe this doesn't really work and maybe the person is not the right fit. How do you deal with mishires, and how do you do it effectively?
Yeah, this is such a good question. And actually, often I think, like, as someone who has gone through this, can be very, very painful, especially the first time you go through it. So to all the people out there who, if this is your first time and you're struggling with this, I deeply empathize. I definitely lost a lot of sleep. So I want you to know that that's a very normal reaction, right? I think one of the things that you need to do is you need to be very clear with the person, and you need to give the person opportunities to improve. And so, to Mark's point, constant feedback is important, and constant feedback is most important for the person who is struggling, right? And so if that means your weekly feedback used to be once a month, you change that to once a week to give them that support, but you also start to give them a heads up that this role is not a good fit for you because right now these competencies don't match your current skill set. Like, what we need doesn't match your current skill set, and help them think about either ways to get there, but also what are their alternative career paths, right? And I think having those conversations in an open way is really important. And Mark will definitely be able to talk more about this, but then also documenting it. And I think sometimes people are afraid to document it. I think when I first went through this, I felt very uncomfortable writing an email saying, hey, these are all the ways you haven't done it. But other than the legal reason to do that, I think the benefit of doing that is it provides clarity to the person. And it also gives them an opportunity to reflect away from the table in front of their boss and think about, okay, how much of this is fair? How much of this do I agree with? And to come back with a response, right? And what I also encourage everyone to do is to create that space to say, how do you respond to the feedback you're receiving? Because, and then slowly, set timeframes that are very clear so you're not stuck with a mishire for a super long time, right? And, and then say, like, look, in a month, if this doesn't work out, we want you to start considering other alternatives and we will give you like 1 month's notice. I think always being fair to them because, look, it's their livelihoods. And they also, like, probably wanted to do their best. They just want the right fit for the role.
Yeah, and especially, like, if we're doing what we were talking about with Andrew earlier, and your early stage, you've expanded to your networks, and these are people you know, and then to have to tell them, sorry, bro, this is not really working out. That's not going to be an easy conversation to have, right? But I think putting steps in place so that it's a fair assessment and a fair and amicable split, I think is really important. Yeah.
I think the other thing that I would encourage, and I think this can be hard to hear as well as the person who, like, if you're the boss, is to actually assign someone outside. So I think in General Assembly that is Mark, like, to have a conversation with the person who is leaving and say, like, what were the barriers that we created for your success? Because I think the reality is, especially in a startup environment, everyone's so busy doing, we don't know whether we're actually doing a great job at setting people up for success. And, we need to learn quickly. And so just making sure the communication channels are open. Actually, don't just do it at the exit interview stage, do it before, make sure the channels are open, but certainly do it at the exit interview and then make sure you're making changes after with your next time.
Actually, that's really interesting. Like, a lot of people don't do exit interviews. Well, firstly, because you don't want to hear it, because the guy's on the way out and you don't want to hear bad news on the way out. But it sounds like it's really important, right, to have these exit interviews, because it's probably the most honest feedback you're going to get. And I guess if you can take it,
they've got nothing to lose now, right? They're going to tell
exactly
you what they think.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Really interesting. Okay. All right. I think that was a really good section. We were talking about the people aspect of what Andrew was talking about earlier. Let's talk a little bit about structure. I know time is running because I think the conversation is really good, and I love the things that you guys are saying. If you don't mind, we may go a little bit over the hour, but I think, and I see questions coming in, so I think we'll be fine if you guys are okay doing that, right? You guys cool? All right. Let's talk about like structuring and how to hire. And I guess, especially for an early stage founder, or even like a more mature company, right? There's always a need to hire, and there's always a need to kind of get the right people in place. But how do you prioritize it, and how do you make decisions around this? Anisha, you got any views on prioritizing who to hire and what roles to hire for?
I think this means you need to have a really clear strategy about where your organization is heading, right? And I, having worked, so I worked in a nonprofit and I helped set up that nonprofit. In a nonprofit, what you're really looking at is really like understanding the consumer, like your we call them beneficiaries, and then understanding how to assess that impact, right? And so in that role, what really mattered to me was I had people who had really good analytical skills. And that was what I prioritized. But in General Assembly, I don't think that is the correct thing to do, right? Here, you need to think about marketing, because we're new. No one knows who we are. How are we going to get that product out? The sales, how are we going to freaking sell that product? Sorry, probably not appropriate to say freaking on.
It's okay. We can't bleep it out, but it's okay, yeah.
And then you need a mark to get things like done, lights on, right? Yeah. And then finally, you have someone who is doing like the execution work. But again, I think, there is a danger in giving, like general advice about this. In fact, I was reading this, I was like doing some research for this, and everyone has different opinions. And all that should tell you is you really need to reflect on what your short-term and long-term goals are for your organization and map that out to roles.
Oh, really interesting. So like, that implies that you need to have a plan. You can't just like wing it and just say like, this is the need I have. I need to boost sales, so therefore you kind of have to have like a longer view of this, right? Like, and I think that's a challenge a lot of founders and entrepreneurs actually don't have, especially SME owners who like, I got to hire for today's problem quickly. Yeah. I want to throw a kind of interesting question about organizational design. Like, how do you do the org charts, the org structure, decision-making processes? How do you do checks and balances in the organization? Like, and what did you do when it didn't work? I don't know if Mark or Andrew or Anisha want to take this one.
I'm happy to take this one. I think, like I said, it's one of the decisions that you make fairly early on. When you're setting up a team, right? Like, how is everyone going to be structured? What are the teams going to be? And I can tell you from experience, having actually made this mistake before, that getting it wrong in the beginning, it will live with you, right? Like how you, like, if you don't, if for instance, you think about, what you thought was actually one business is actually two businesses, right? Or if you it's not very clear what the roles and responsibilities are between two teams, and it all gets muddled, and everyone builds things separately from one another. Like, if you get it wrong, it will have huge implications on the business. It will have huge implications on the direction that your organization goes, and frankly, it'll have huge implications on the people that you have as well, right? Like, you might find that individuals leave, right, because they don't actually know what their roles are. They're overburdened, etc., right? So let me start by saying it's easy to think of org design as a bunch of boxes and lines, but actually it has it's a box, it's boxes and lines that have huge implications on the organization and the individuals in it, right? Now, the one bit of advice I would have is, if you get it wrong, actually, even before you get it wrong, right? Like, reflect on whether it's right as you go along, right? Because one mistake that I made with an organization, the first sort of organization team that I built, was I got it wrong, and I had a hypothesis. I went in with the hypothesis, and I stuck to it, and I didn't let go of it soon enough, right? I was just like, oh no, this is just a bit of trouble that we're going through right now. It's okay. Everyone will suck it up, and we will power through it, and it will be okay. And it was not okay, right? It really wasn't. And I wish from that experience, the things that I learned, obviously reflect on it very often. Speak to people, not just about the work that they're doing, but also about the organization as a whole, because those are different things. Right. And taking that step back and getting the advice of the people that you're working with, and release your agenda. Like, get rid of, if the hypothesis didn't work out, you need to know when to say it's not working out, and then restructure the team accordingly. And sometimes it requires difficult decisions to be made.
On that point, I think that's a really good way to end that note, because we got a question that came in earlier. I think it kind of syncs up with what you're saying, right? It's from Wei Hong, who asks, what has been the biggest mistake you've made while building an organizational team? So I can go first while you guys are thinking of an answer. So I remember I wouldn't say which company, but there was a company where we had a separate, a whole team was being built. We kind of gave a lot of autonomy to especially one particular department. And what happened was that department wanted certain benefits, like, we wanted more work from home, flexible hours. And I think the challenge we had was we did not really give it to everyone, because we wanted everybody to be together, right? And what effectively that created was a situation where some parts of the team had a different lifestyle from the others, and effectively it split the team in half. It was only later that we had to kind of change things around to fix it, but it was really, really painful when we did it. And so I think that was like the most painful mistake I made, and it cost us a lot of time, definitely a lot of money, and I think it was a really, really difficult period just to make those changes, just to get the entire team in sync on the same set of rules or company culture. Yeah. Andrew, do you have a story to share?
Yeah, I've got one, and that is, I think I made this mistake fairly early on, which is that, I started this team, and I'm not a marketing person, right? Like, I'm just not a marketing person, and so I didn't have exposure at that time, right, to marketing, and I had someone who was responsible for that function, and I just gave them complete latitude, right? And that's okay, right? There's nothing wrong with giving people latitude, but there is a difference between giving people space and not asking enough questions and understanding what's going on within that space, right? Because the moment black boxes form within an organization, it should have alarm bells ringing, right? And in my case, I allowed a black box to form, and a lot of hand waving to take place of like, I'm the marketing guy, like, just trust me, I'm gonna be, this is my thing, just leave me alone. And it's that's not acceptable, right? Like, you shouldn't allow black boxes to form, even if someone else is an expert and you trust their decisions. It is still incumbent upon you as a leader to understand what's going on in that part of the organization. I didn't, and I paid the price for it.
Yeah, I can empathize with it. In fact, like one of the listeners or viewers, Amelia Amber asks, and I think she's from YouTube, I think, asks, you know, oftentimes startups and small organizations are rather lean, and people wear multiple hats. And you know, how do you ensure when someone leaves, the organization doesn't collapse with it? And I guess that nightmare scenario which you described, how do you prevent it?
I mean, maybe
You
I
wanna take
can
this?
say something
Sure.
quick about that. I think often I remember telling my ex-boss this. I was like, you know, hopefully I do a good enough job that you can fire me, right? Right? Just told Andrew that don't fire me, by the way. But the thing here is to make sure that people actually eventually have enough autonomy on their role and they have enough confidence, right? And I think part of what we're going to talk about in the next section is processes, but the people need to have an understanding of processes, but also, you know, when we talk about this idea of teams and organizations and meetings and sharing, people actually understand each other's roles, right? So in the event that the person doesn't even have to resign, right? The person just needs to be out sick in a lean team for you to feel those reverberations, right? And so making sure that other team members understand the role, that things are documented or easy to use, and that is being shared constantly, weekly. So it's not when they go sick, suddenly they're like phone calls to this person saying, hey, how do I do this, right?
Yeah, excellent. That's really good feedback, Anisha. Hey, so Mark, when thinking about building an organization, can we prioritize what work should be done internally versus jobs that we can outsource? And this is like a startup entrepreneur's problem or like a small business, right? Because obviously you won't be able to hire that dream team immediately. You're running up low on cash, so or maybe you can't find the person. But how do you make this decision? So again, we don't create the nightmare scenario we're talking about just now and have to mitigate it, right? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we all want everything straight away, but then it's a basic problem about having scarce resources. Yeah, I mean, we want to build all the necessary internal capabilities, but it doesn't necessarily happen that way. I mean, you got to realize that in organizations, yeah, all functions are important. They have their benefits, but no, unfortunately. So how do you prioritize? I mean, what functions are critical to the business? Obviously, initially, a lot of people will be focusing on revenue building, because without revenue, there's nothing else much to shout about. And then obviously looking at your competitive advantage, how do you build that competitive advantage?
Yeah.
You know, whether it's from a pricing point of view, from an execution, looking at delivery, looking at your brand, and even cost can be a competitive advantage. So for a lot of organizations, you need to look at what your main priorities are. And obviously, yeah, we mentioned so many times, business cannot focus on all things. You don't necessarily have all the skills, you don't have the time, and sometimes, you know, you just have to be able to prioritize and to actually decide which ones will bring you the most benefits at the end of the day.
Right.
I mean, saying that, you know, even support functions, you know, I've seen support functions that can actually bring benefits to the organization. One example I can quote is having the credit control department. This credit control department was able to bring in money a lot more faster than the whole industry, and virtually it paid for it. The department paid for itself, you know. So yeah, you can build skills and you can build and you can optimize in many different areas, but then which ones matter first to your business? That's the way you should be looking at it.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. Sorry, was someone going to say something? Yeah, I was going to say that it's really interesting because you know, sometimes when you bring a part-time employee on board, and because they are not full-time, because you can't afford them, but but you can also then hire really highly skilled part-timers, and the value they could bring to the organization could be quite significant as well. And so, you know, and your team will become better because they're exposed to these kinds of high-level talent as well. Let's move on. I want to go into processes because I got a couple more questions from the audience that I want to get to at some point. And they're slowly coming in, and I do want to not take up too much of your time, even though we're going above the hour. let's talk about processes, and now what kind of processes do we need to be built to determine if a candidate is the right one to hire? Like, especially if I'm a small team, how do I put this together, and how do I grow this process as my team gets bigger moving forward? Andrew, you want to take this one?
Yeah, sure. Happy to, right? I think one of the first things you have to do is to figure out exactly what do you want to have in place, not just for, to hire your first few people, but, the 20, the 100 people who are going to come on board, right? And having a rough sense of what that looks like, what's important to you. So, I'll give you an example, right? In our case, we are a people business. Relationships are key, to how we do things. So one of the things that we decided fairly early on is we wanted multiple, quite a few individuals to actually speak to candidates, right? So our process actually puts candidates in front of, multiple people, right? And not necessarily people they're going to work with. Right. And the idea there is to get a diversity of, opinions, and, see how this person's going to sort of interact with different kinds of people. Right. So we decided that early on, and our process was built with that in mind. Right. So, you don't get into General Assembly unless you've spoken to at least 3 different people. Right. So, that's one thing that we decide, and drawing on the collective wisdom of, we have 3 people within the, this person has spoken to 3 different people. We get a sense of the cultural fit as well. Right. Like, is this person, do we actually get a sense of, is this going to be, I was speaking to, a mentor of mine, and, this thing he always repeats, right? Back when we were able to fly, he would say, do you want to be stuck on a plane with this person in the seat next to them, and they start a conversation with you, right? And if the answer to that is no, right, then then they're probably not the best fit, right? So how do you actually identify individuals who are going to speak, who are going to fit in with the organization? The other thing is, it's easy to fall into the trap of not being as fact-based as you could be, right? And to fall back on gut instinct and initial reactions that you have to people. So you need some element of standardization that will help with that and take some of the randomness out of it, right? And in our case, one of the things that we do is, we administer, I don't really want to call them case studies, but they're almost like scenarios that are structured, and to see how people respond to those scenarios. It's not to understand what the answers people have to questions, what the answers people have to questions are, but to see how they think about problems. Right. And if you give everyone the same problem in the same context, then you can start comparing candidates with one another and say, okay, this is how they dealt with the same problem, right, in the same context. And that gives you an element of standardization that you can then, you say, okay, I spoke to 5 candidates, and these 4 did this, but this one person was like, way above and beyond, and therefore I think this person stands out for this reason. So, taking some of the guesswork and the gut instinct out of it too.
Okay. So I guess it's a lot to do with making sure that the processes are right. And that's kind of how you and the process kind of leads you to the right candidate in the end, I suppose, right? That's kind of what, I guess.
Aaron, the one other thing I'll just add to that very quickly is that interviews are not just a way to learn about candidates. It's a way for candidates to learn about the organization, right?
Great point. That's a great point, yeah.
I think one of the things that we try, well, at least I won't speak for everyone, it's part of our process, but I do it, is I also introduce myself during interviews. I introduce the organization, right? One of the things I tell all candidates is why I come to work every day. Right. And you'd be surprised how that you can see people's eyes light up when you do that. Right. And then they get a sense of who this person is that they could potentially work with. And the flavor of the organization that they're what they're walking into, right? So it's a two-way thing.
Excellent. But I guess the question about that kind of process is how do you determine which HR processes and policies do we need to implement, right? How do you know what the right policies are? Mark, do you have a view on this? I guess being an ops guy, maybe you've got a view on how to do that.
Yeah, I do have many views on this. I mean, when we talk about policies, when we talk about processes, we need to have some form of guidance, help to improve transparency. There's the consistency in decision making. You don't have to keep referring upwards or to someone else for a decision. It doesn't sort of hold the company or ransom for a particular time. It helps when you have good processes or necessary processes and policies. It helps the organization actually move faster, a lot more. I mean, ideally, we would like to have all the necessary processes in place, but again, as usual, it's never possible. How do we assess the right priority? I will look at the impact to the organization, likelihood of occurrences, right? I mean, if you are looking at building a business, obviously building revenue, your service delivery, those processes have to be tip top, because you get one chance at talking to a client, and you get one chance to deliver, and you have to do it. You have to under promise and over deliver in that particular area. And that's the only way that they will be coming back to you for recurring businesses. Other areas, obviously, where there's a critical need. So we will have risk assessments done, like, for example, fraud, or where there are low controls. These things obviously need to be addressed, and to make sure that the risks are minimized. And there's obviously the need driven by compliance, legally, as well as compliance with certain laws. These things will also help drive when certain processes are supposed to be in place.
Right.
At the end of the day, there has to be some form of a system in place, no matter what.
And do you think the system should evolve? And I guess it should, but how would it evolve as the company gets bigger? Like, how should we companies think about this and structure? Like, obviously, when it's smaller, it's a more lean system, but when it gets bigger, you probably have to scale it. How do you think through this?
Yeah, I mean, you have big organizations or small organizations. When you're smaller, when you're closer with people, it's easier to manage. The larger the organization grows, obviously, when you have a lot more people to manage and it becomes harder, that's where processes become very, very important. The other thing is, as how organizations mature, there will be organizations that mature well and grow well, and there will be organizations that don't actually do too well in that particular area. It's just like people, people grow, and some are good people and some are not so good people. So we need to be able to take all those things into consideration and to actually find a balance, so that then we can then decide what are the necessary processes in place. Like, for example, if you start off with a culture of zero tolerance on fraud, no matter what size your organization is, that helps to build a culture of honesty, that helps to build people with integrity. And as the organization grows, you become less focused on controls in those particular areas, because you can trust people, you can empower people, and this helps the organization in terms of being able to make decisions faster and move a lot more faster. And in a competitive world, that becomes a key competitive advantage.
Absolutely. Yeah, I like the idea of putting in processes and in the way you hire your team, because it creates consistency and shows that you don't make kind of mistakes. I remember when I first started running companies, one of the big mistakes I used to make is I used to use my gut a lot, right? And I sometimes think that sometimes you over-index how good your gut is and underestimate how good this random probability is in your hiring process, right? You just got lucky. That's really what's happening. It's not really your gut, but I guess Andrew, have you ever used your gut and overvaluing compatibility or achievement or experience when hiring a candidate?
Absolutely. I'd be lying if I said I hadn't. I think it's interesting you say that, Aaron, because I've I've had a similar reflection, especially, and by the way, these moments of humility come about usually after, you've made some made some horrible boo-boo, right?
Exactly.
And at least for me, one thing, and I have team members who are very good at this. I get excited sometimes. Actually, I'm not so worried about the times when I'm overly critical. It's the times when I get too excited and go like, yes, this is gonna this is gonna work.
Yeah,
it's gonna be wonderful, right? Like, and I get moments like that where I just go like, oh yeah, like this is gonna be awesome.
You fall in love quickly, right? Like that's what's happening.
That's
right.
right.
Oh,
That's
great.
right.
This person's awesome. Like, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm someone who gets like super excited about stuff. So like if there is something that I'm passionate about or like I feel good about, I jump in 2 feet, and and that's usually where the problems happen, right? In my case, at least, right?
Yeah.
And what I've done is I've managed to surround myself with people who hold my worst instincts, who help me with my worst instincts, right? A few people who are on this webinar, completely honestly.
The ones giggling the most in mute are the ones I am assuming do this a lot, right?
Yes, and who go like, hold on, Andrew, right? Like, help me understand this a bit more, right? Like, why do you think that, right? And they don't even necessarily come in and sort of rain on my parade, right? They just ask questions, and they offer perspective. And and that perspective and those questions are sometimes all you need to say like, yeah, you know what, I got way too excited about this. Maybe I should calm down. I should reflect on this a bit more, and be a bit more circumspect, right? And I think surrounding yourself with people who are not necessarily going to jump on the get excited train together with you, who are going to ask you tough questions, who are going to tell you the truth. Like, that's the best way to deal with that.
Excellent. It's really important to have people that you trust and who trust you to really tell you the truth as well, right? I think that's really important. We're just going to do one last question on this block, which is on the process itself, and then I want to just wrap it up. We're just going through some of the questions that we've not answered from the audience, and I think this last question is really on a lot of people's minds, especially since we recently announced that our lockdown potentially will go till the end of the year. So I guess, how do you remain engaged with your staff or employees, especially with this remote work environment? People can't go to the office, or actually, one thing is if everybody's not in the office, but when companies, when they do the A/B team thing, where half the guys are going to the office all week and then the other half are not, how do you keep people engaged? And how do you, as a leader or as the CEO or the boss, how are you able to maintain that kind of the culture in the company? Anisha, how would you do this?
Yeah, it's such a good question, and it's a real tough one. And like, I'm not gonna claim that we've got this right yet. I think we're learning how to get this right. So take everything I say with a pinch of salt. I think the first thing at a process level, I think it's important that teams have daily catch-ups. This shouldn't be long, it shouldn't be painful for the team members, but it should be 10 minutes. So no matter where you are, you're doing a quick daily catch-up of what's happening. It's pretty important for people to feel heard and feel seen. And so that's a good way of doing it. We're a small enough organization that we can do an organization-wide check-in. That probably changes depending on your size, but that is also something I think is a good idea. The other thing I think is, creating situations where people can interact that does not revolve around the stresses of work. And what are those social situations, but also that it is not purely run by management, right? You don't want to be forcing things down people's throats. So one of the things we do is we use Slack, as Andrew mentioned, and we do this thing called donuts, right? So people are randomly paired with each other, they have coffee together, and they have a chat, and it's a good way to get the rest of the organization talking, because I think one of the concerns is, the pandemic reinforces silos, right? If you're just having team meetings, you're not talking between teams, and this enables people to interact. We have created a culture where people can offer to run events, run activities. So one of our colleagues, Erica, she runs yoga sessions on Thursdays. People take over lunch sessions on Wednesdays, and they run fun activities. And it's really up to people to decide what that looks like. And I think what is important, though, is that as the management team or leaders, you are committed and you engage in those activities as well, right? So they show that you want to be there and you are proud of all the work they're doing. I think finally, it's really important to recognize also the loneliness that people are having and making mental health resources available. People often, when they're going through a tough time, are not going to say it. They're not going to speak out. And so one of the ways that I think we are thinking of doing this, and I can't tell you how effective it is yet, is we've released mental health resources to the teams, and we openly say how we are feeling, right? So role modeling is critical in this case. And so, I am comfortable in like a check-in on a specific day saying to my team, hey guys, I'm really tired. I'm feeling really lonely. I don't know how I'm taking this pandemic. And sharing that with my team, and they will cheer me up. They will do something, but also hopefully that gives them the space when they're having a bad day to say it. And I and the rest of like our organization can do something to help.
Right. Well, that's really interesting. Yeah, actually, you're right. Like, besides the entertainment aspect or the company culture aspect, we also have to take care of our people as well, because they're also stuck at home. And I think what we're also seeing is that it's not just that people are at home and they're bored, which they are clearly, and there's only so much Netflix can take you, right? Or only so far I can go. But it's also that they're stuck at home with other people that they're not usually used to being stuck at home with, right? And that, I think, is also driving a lot of people kind of crazy as well. Thanks so much, guys. That was a fantastic block where we're just talking about the people, the structure, and the processes, and how that's important to building the organization. I've tried to kind of splice some of the questions that are coming in the conversation as we've gone along, but there are a couple more that we didn't really get to. So I just thought maybe we'll take one or two more, and then we'll wrap it up, because we're way over the hour, and I think people have other things they want to do, and they got to get back to work, I guess, or whatever thing that's going to be helping them with their day. I have a really interesting question that I saw from Shamir Marshall. Would you encourage team members to invest in their side hustle? Any worries that would impact their commitment to the full-time job?
I'm happy to take this one, and I'll be the first person to raise my hand and say I have plenty of side hustles. And look, I actually think it's important. I think it's important for people to have things that they consider important outside of work, right? And if by side hustle you mean specifically something that is work related, so like another business or another. I think that the opportunities for cross-fertilization of ideas, is huge, right? And I know that I get a lot of ideas. I run my organization better because I have side hustles.
Right.
And because of the connections that I get from those side hustles, because of the ideas I get from those side hustles, because of when you've got something else, your mind is open to another area. Right. And to, potentially another industry, another set of people, et cetera. The opportunities that come from that are massive. So, I think it's actually a wonderful thing, and it should be encouraged. I think, probably I'm reading between the lines over here. There is a worry that, that people might not focus. Right. Yeah. And, and that time will be spent on different things. And who knows if they're going to commit 100% to, what they, to the organization. And, my answer to that is, do you really want someone who only does, who lives and breathes just the work and doesn't do, anything else? Right. And look, if they're passionate about your organization, if they're committed to making it successful, if they're committed to their role, it doesn't matter if they have, stuff on the side. I think it's, like I said, it adds. I don't think it detracts.
I guess it's also like a lot of Asian employers think this way, like, no, you're hired for this one job, and this is the only thing you can do, right? And right, it's a very cultural thing as well. But I think you're right, Andrew. Like, it does enrich the employee's life to have other interests as well. And what we sometimes miss out is the value that you can bring to the organization, because we're always thinking of what it takes out, but actually it brings a lot to the organization as well. PMF on YouTube says, how do we ensure that teams and people always feel valued, especially in smaller organizations? The fear is that those who are in trouble often get the most visibility and wins, and those who are doing a great job often gets overlooked. I think, Anisha, we were talking about something similar earlier about keeping the culture alive, but I think this specifically towards people feeling valued as they work. Anybody want to take this one?
Yeah, I feel like, this is like the question parents have, right? It's like you have the problem child, and then you have the child that's getting all A's, and the problem child gets all the attention. Or it's like the middle child syndrome, kan? Look, I actually think it's a really hard thing to balance. And I think, like, an important part is feeling seen. And it's interesting. I think there are very public ways of doing that, right? You can send an email congratulating the team that's doing really well. But a lot of the reading that I've been doing shows that the most important thing for a person is very genuine appreciation from their leaders or their bosses, right? And what does that look like? It looks more like if the person has done a good job, a call saying, hey, thank you so much. I really appreciate all the work you put into this. And often that is enough. Like, that is what they need, right? They don't necessarily need a big hurrah. They need to know that they're seen and their efforts are appreciated. And so I really encourage more thoughtful gestures rather than grand gestures, right? Make sure people feel seen.
And if I may add to that, I think it's about celebrating the successes, but also being very conscious to be there and listen when things go wrong as well, right? I think just as important as patting someone on the back is saying, checking in with them when they appear a bit down during a call, right? Or checking in with them when, something they expected to go right goes horribly wrong, and, just having a conversation with them about, like, how do you feel about that, right? Because one thing that I have found is, yes, relationships are built on those highs, but they're also built in those troughs, right? And, if someone is in a hole, you get down into that hole together with them and be there for them. That helps a lot, actually, and arguably even more than celebrating the wins.
Oh, that's excellent, guys. We'll just do two more questions.
One more thing?
Sure, Mark, go ahead. Yeah.
I mean, as a management team and being in a small organization, we are all equally responsible for everyone. Sometimes you've got to realize that certain individuals may not want to speak out with their direct bosses. So it's easier for someone else to actually come in and try and play that role and try and bridge that gap and try to understand, what perhaps is troubling the employee. So I think it involves the whole management team, the whole leadership team.
That's excellent, really excellent. We'll just do two more questions before we wrap it up. There was a question that came in. The first question was a guy called Hubert, who runs a company called QuadB. It's a ScaleUp Malaysia Cohort 2 company, and they focus on a social platform for people in college or Gen Z, right? So he's asked a question. I'm not sure how we're going to answer it, and I may rephrase the question just to make this interesting. So he found the session that Andrew gave very enriching, very insightful, he said. He loved it, and he asked what age group is this research being done with? And then the second question is, are there any research done for Gen Y, Gen Z age group, particularly the 18 to 24? And I'll just add a little bit of my slant on this, just so that we can kind of maybe take it from a different angle as well. It's like, do you think employees in Gen Z, Gen Y behave differently from other age groups, right? So, are boomer employees very different? And, do we need to account for this cultural shift in the way people look at work and life and everything in between? Anyone who can take this one, actually.
I'm scared, Mark.
Yeah, because these Gen Z guys, right? You say the wrong thing, they'll come at you in the comments. That's the thing.
I mean, absolutely. When you're talking about people of different generations and everything, you have to adapt your leadership style. There's no one leadership style that manages everyone. Everything has to be adapted. You've got to take into consideration what that generation aspires to, what makes them tick, what excites them. And if you don't, and the organization that GA is being built upon requires these talents of these generations. So we constantly have to attract people, and the only way to attract is to be adaptive and to offer what they want.
I fully agree with Mark, and I think a lot of ink has been spilled on how Gen Y, Gen Z is different from all the other generations before, and they're there's research that shows that they're more likely to change careers entirely, more less likely to stick around in a role for longer, more likely to place greater importance on the purpose and mission of an organization relative to the work that's being done. I can go on all day, right? I think instead of dwelling on whether all of that is right, I think it is safe to say though that the nature of the workforce that we find ourselves in right now is entirely different from the one that existed 5-10 years ago, right? And is that Gen Y, Gen Z coming in? Yes, that's part of it, but it's also because expectations have changed, right? And people, regardless of which generation they're from, their expectations have changed. The expectation that you stick around in an organization for life, that's gone, that's dead, right? The expectation that you study something in school and that thing that you studied in school is going to keep you through, you're going to be in that thing for the rest of your career, that's dead as well, right? The idea that a job is just a job and nothing else, right? Like that you don't need to have a sense of mission tied to it. You don't really have to care about the people you work with. I think that's increasingly going out the window as well. And so it's not just about the generations. I think expectations have changed. And if you are going to be a successful organization in this day and age, you got to get with the times, and find how you can motivate the workforce of today, and not just rely on how things were done before.
Yeah. Excellent. Yeah, I know it's a really interesting thing, especially for people who have worked for many years and to see the different cultures work together. And right now, I think what I've always seen is like Gen Z people work in Gen Z type companies, but it's very rare that there's mixing, and hopefully now we're starting to see that, especially since everybody's learning to kind of be a bit more flexible in the way they work. I think that's really interesting. Okay, let's end with the last question. I think is a really interesting one. It's from a guy called Mohammed Hafsham. Andrew, startups and scales often buy talent. I thought it was interesting. What's your approach was building versus buying talent? So I'm going to paraphrase what I think he's asking. I think, is it better to upskill or reskill your existing workforce or hire somebody who can do the job? Which is a better approach?
Yeah, so it's a great question, and one that, regardless of whether you're a scale-up, a startup, scale-up, or an established business, you have to answer, right? It's funny, we actually put out a report on this not too long ago. And based on our research, at least, it can sometimes cost you half as much to grow talent internally as it does to, for you to hire talent externally, right? And that kind of jives, I think, with what a lot of people think, right? Like if you're going to poach someone from outside, you're going to have to pay more money. You've got to search around for them. You might have to use headhunters. Like who knows, right? Like there are all these costs involved and there's an opportunity cost in having the position vacant the whole time, etc. So it actually costs an organization more to get people into the organization versus growing people internally. Having said that, a lot of organizations struggle with growing people internally, right? Because, you might not have, let's say you're building up a data science team from scratch, right? If no one there knows data science, like, you can train the people you have all you want, right? Like they're not going to become data scientists, right?
Yeah.
It's also a struggle because, a lot of employers, a lot of organizations think if I have to send my people to training, that's time that they're not, that they're not working, and who knows, maybe they're going to leave and go to another organization. And employers who tell me that, I say, like, do you really want to do you want to hold on to someone so tightly and not train them, or do you actually want to train them and make sure that they're doing their jobs well, and then have to worry about the problem? Because you can have why keep all these people who are not ready, not prepared to do their jobs around, right? So, I would, my advice here would be, invest to build. I think using the language that was given, invest to build that talent where you can. And if you really can't, then go out and buy it, right? And there are ways to do it carefully as well.
I'm sure Harshal appreciates you using the same language. All right, thank you, Andrew, Anisha, and Mark. Thanks so much for this afternoon. I think this is excellent, and I love some of the things you shared. I thought before we end the session, we've got people who've been with us since the start. I'm quite amazed, and we've been doing this for like an hour, 34 minutes. So I think we must be saying something, right? But I guess before we call it a day and say goodbye, maybe each of you can share like some final thoughts before we end this, and maybe how people can reach out to you if they need to reach out to you for any support from General Assembly. Yeah. Maybe we'll start with Anisha, then Mark, and then Andrew. You can wrap it up, and then I'll close off.
Wow, that's the hardest question, right? The final thought.
It is.
Always is. Yeah, I think, at the end of the day, like, it's very cliched, but people are at the heart of the organization. And I think just having that level of empathy and thinking it through and not just assuming people are cogs in the wheel is just part of that process. And once you start thinking that way, I think the rest of stuff will not necessarily fall into place, but at least you will be aware of what you need to do to hopefully build an organization and not just put people together for a business. If you want to get in touch, like, feel free to add me on LinkedIn. I think that's the best way if you have any questions. Awesome. And then if you want to know more about our products, go to our website.
What's the website URL? We'll put it up for everybody.
AcademyGA. I think it's best if we will leave it in the YouTube channels and in the specific
channels.
Yeah,
okay. We'll put it in the comments and share it. Yeah.
www.academyga.com.
Yeah.
Mouthful.
Okay. We'll put it up for you guys, for those who are watching us. Thanks, Anisha.
In terms of last advice, I would say, at the end of the day, it takes people to build organizations. Very important that you need to treat people with respect. Treat people as how you would like to be treated. I think that's so important, and that helps to actually, make sure that you are on the right path, build relationships, engage with people, as Anisha said, have empathy. All these things are absolutely, absolutely important because we're dealing with people at the end of the day.
Yeah, absolutely. How can people reach out to you, Mark? LinkedIn?
I think we're going to be putting it on a, I'm available through LinkedIn, Mark Heng, yeah. And I think we're putting in a link as well after this to ensure that people can get in touch with us.
Awesome. Andrew, final thoughts. Thanks, Mark.
Yeah. I think my final thoughts, the last thing I'd like to share is this. I think we all are capable of more than we are currently doing. And there is the seed of potential in all of us. And it is vital for you and to understand what that potential is within yourself, or what that potential could be, and to help others realize what that potential could be, and then help them achieve that potential, or go about and achieve that potential yourself. Right? This idea that we can be more, we can be better, we can aim higher. I think is it's something that I've always held important, and I think is especially important for people who are leading organizations, growing organizations, etc. Right? We can all be better. You can reach me on LinkedIn, and check out our website as well.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks so much, Andrew. Andrew, Mark, Anisha, thank you so much for being with us. It was an absolute pleasure talking to you guys. I enjoyed the conversation, and hopefully when the pandemic's over, we can all do the Mamak session and do it in real life. It'll be nice. And hopefully we'll introduce some of our companies to you guys, and we can maybe work with you moving forward. I know we've got lots of things planned with General Assembly anyway, so we're looking forward to that moving forward. All right, thank you everyone for joining us for ScaleUp Malaysia partner sessions. This is a session we've put up for you guys so you can learn from our partners and potentially take advantage of some of the benefits that they're providing for the ecosystem and hopefully improve your business as well. If you want to find out more about ScaleUp Malaysia, check us out on social media. You're probably already there if you're watching this right now, or go to www.scaleup.my for more information. Until the next time, my name is Aaron Sama from ScaleUp Malaysia. Take care, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.